This is WCM's Park Update, a weekly show covering the outdoor hospitality industry, hosted by Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. During each episode, you'll hear from special guests and campground experts on topics that will help your park flourish. WCM's Park Update is a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine.
Hi, I'm Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground Magazine, and this is another episode of WCM's Park Update. And of course, my esteemed colleague, Mike Gast, former Vice President of Communications at Campgrounds of America, is here. And our guest today is Lewis Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of Nomadic Resorts. And Lewis, just tell us where you're joining us from again.
Yeah, so I'm calling in from Mauritius, which is in the south of the Indian Ocean near Madagascar.
All right, so you're almost like on the completely opposite side of the world than me. So that's kind of neat. How long have you lived there?
I've lived here for 5 years, but I've been coming here for 23 years. My wife is Mauritian, so I first came out here to study 23 years ago.
Okay, all right. And is that where the company's based out of?
Yeah, we founded the company here in 2011. First company, Nomadic Resorts, which is our design company.
Okay, and I guess just give us a little bit of a view of, I've heard of Nomadic Resorts. Obviously, I met you at the glamping show Americas last year, and that was a great show. I guess just give us a little bit of a view of what you guys do at Nomadic Resorts. I know I see awesome pictures that you guys post from all around the world, these tents and different structures at resorts.
So
that's okay. So I guess, yeah, just give us a little view of what you guys do.
So basically, my background was in the luxury hospitality industry. So I worked for a luxury resort company called Six Senses. And whilst working for those guys, I suddenly realized that there were going to be some changes in the way that people design and build resorts in remote locations. So that was back in 2008 when I worked on a project called Son of a Curie, which was, I think it's still one of the most expensive tented camps in the world. But it was a real hard project. And whilst we were working in the project management side, we concluded that basically there was going to be a kind of shift in the way that these remote resorts were going to be developed in the future. And so we started designing prefabricated tented modules that could be air conditioned and could have all of the kind of levels of luxury of a traditional luxury resort, but could be, fabricated in a workshop and delivered and installed much faster than a traditional resort was.
Yeah. So I guess, how many projects do you guys have going on right now? Do you guys stay pretty busy all around the world?
Yeah, so we started in 2011 and we got a first project in Sri Lanka called Wild Coast Tented Lodge, which is a pretty successful safari lodge in like a pretty remote part of Sri Lanka. And since that project was pretty successful. Became one of the sort of leading safari lodges in Asia. And since that project, we have a lot going. Yeah, so we did a project in Mexico recently called Playa Viva Tree Houses, which is a series of bamboo tree houses. We've got a project here in Mauritius, which will be our the first tented camp project that we manage ourselves. And then we also have a floating camp in Kerala in India. We have a kind of hiking exploration camp being built in Nepal opposite Mount Everest. We have a kind of eco village in Dominican Republic. And we have a kind of overwater villas and bamboo bar kind of thing in the Maldives. So pretty busy.
So is this a marketing relationship between are you the one that ties all these resorts together?
No, we're just we're like guns for hire, man. So we'll basically design stuff for other people. So, people come and say to us, hey, I've got a piece of land in Nebraska, for example, and I want to do a tent camp. Can you guys help us to develop that? Typically, they're fairly high end. So, the most expensive ones we've done maybe at $3,000 a night. But so we basically applied a lot of that expertise from the luxury resort industry to the kind of
Well, if you did one in Nebraska, you'd have to make it out of corn stalks. So that'd be a challenge. So, how do people find you? Is it just word of mouth?
Yeah, we got a kind of reputation in our little niche of the niches. So we work in a very sort of small world, and there aren't many people who really do what we do. So there's maybe only 2 or 3 other companies in the world, I guess, who kind of can deliver at that level, which means that basically we participate in some award ceremonies within the industry. So we typically, we do the AHEAD Awards and some hospitality design awards, just a specialized industry, kind of award ceremonies. And then we've also been featured in loads of stuff. Our projects have been featured in Condé Nast, Travel and Leisure, Tatler, then a whole Marie Claire, and all the newspapers and Newsweek and all this other stuff. So I guess we've kind of got a little bit of a reputation from those things.
So when you're out there pushing the limits like you do, there must be a lot of trial and error. There's got to be things that you do that you go, well, that didn't work, then we have to go a different direction.
Actually, thankfully, we haven't had that experience today.
Wow.
No, but I think that's one of the misunderstandings. People see what we do and they think, we're a bunch of crazy cowboy kids who, are sort of, making up designs and, in a bar on a napkin, and yeah, let's do this. But actually, that doesn't really work like that. So we actually have a pretty rigorous engineering process behind what we do. So this is one of the things that I explained at the glamping show in the USA when I was talking about it. We use very sophisticated tensile membrane modeling software to be able to engineer tents to specific wind speed and climate conditions. That could be like snow loads, that could be hurricane conditions. We're doing a tent here that we're designing to 280 kilometers an hour wind speeds for a cyclonic environment. We also do things like thermal modeling and computational fluid dynamics so that we can understand how the interior temperature of the tents will behave under different climatic conditions. And this stuff might seem like a little bit geeky, but the reality is that I think, people are going to have to pay more and more attention to this stuff as the industry kind of professionalizes, particularly the glamping or the outdoor lodging sector. We have an increasingly unpredictable environment and climatic conditions can vary very significantly. And then there's going to be more legislation. There's going to be, inevitably, there's going to be a little bit more regulation that comes into these kind of products. So not just, for permissions process, but also for the insurance as well.
That was my next question. Was you're all over the place working on these projects, and there must be somebody in charge of permitting and getting through all those government regulations just to make sure that you can do what you want to do.
Yeah, so we have to work, or typically we work with a local architect of record. So in most projects, we're the design architect, and then we'll work with the local architect of record who review our drawings and make sure that they adhere to local guidelines and codes, basically.
And what about consumer research? Whatever you make has to be accepted and used by the folks, by the customers and the guests that you're after. Do you do a lot of extensive research, or is that done by the client?
That's an interesting question. So I do a lot of research about the outdoor lodging stroke glamping sector, and I have done for many, many years. So I have a kind of accumulated database of kind of how that sector has developed and evolved over the years. But we don't use that to design. We use that basically to understand to some extent what the projected guest requirements will be in terms of kind of facilities and level of comfort. But the actual design process that we use comes from the guest experience we want to deliver. So we reverse engineer the thing. So let's say you've got a luxury camp project in Utah near Zion National Park, and it's a fantastic mountain biking location. It's got great hiking. It's got incredible biodiversity, dramatic landscapes. We'll work out with the client what the activities program for that place is. What is the food and beverage concept? What's the spa concept? What activities will guests be doing? And then we design a tent or a cabin or a lodge or whatever it is to basically deliver that experience to the optimum possible level.
Okay. Have you, sorry guys, my internet connection must be pretty bad today. So I'm back though. Hopefully we stay on here. Have you maybe you guys already tackled this, but has the interest in the United States been, going up here? Have you guys been looking at more projects here in like the US or like?
Oh, there he goes again. Well, I think he got his question across.
Interesting question, that one. So the United States is a little bit of an anomaly. So we won the AHEAD Awards Global Americas for the best pods, lodges, and cabins last year. And we thought we were going to get a lot more inquiries from the US because of that. It was quite a high-profile kind of award ceremony, but we didn't get quite the feedback that we thought. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think historically, the US has followed a slightly different trajectory from Europe. In Europe, the glamping industry kind of developed from a kind of mom and pop farm style diversification background. And whereas the US, you already had quite a sophisticated RV infrastructure and a kind of outdoor sports mentality that was kind of widespread. But what was a little bit different from the rest of the world, I think, was that there started to become actual brands of glamping brands, like Under Canvas and Collective Retreats, and to a lesser extent maybe Habitas, where those guys, actually got the funding to expand nationwide to develop a specific brand. So that's what we've now been working on for the last couple of years. We're now following their lead and saying, okay, well, we're going to manage our own tented camps specialized on outdoor adventure sports. So the focus will be on wellness, adventure tourism, and outdoor adventure sports and sustainability. And so that we're hoping that in the future that we'll get more opportunities in the US, because frankly, I think you've got so many locations with such huge potential to develop this kind of product. And you've also got, you've got the clientele who will pay the money to do these kind of things. As we've seen Camp Sarika, Amangiri, those tents are going for $6,000 a night. And you're going to have trouble even getting a booking. So that market does exist in the US. And I think, we'll probably see more and more kind of ultra luxury camps of that nature, wilderness camps, that they call wilderness or Camp Sarika.
So you've got some experience.
We're going to get more interested in this. Yeah?
Yeah, I guess it doesn't surprise me. I think you're right on the point about we've got 15 million RVers out there, or 50 million units out there rolling around, where people are bringing their own room, and there just aren't enough spots for them yet. So a lot of the capital investment's been going on in the camping and RVing sector. It's been pouring in there. Takes a while in the United States to build an RV resort, but once they're done, they can be really cash cows. They can be very, very profitable with probably less investment than you make in a such a unique facility like you've got. Is it, now that you got this experience all over the world, including the US, is the US a tougher place to do business than other parts of the world?
I was quite surprised. The project we did in the US in 2020, I was quite surprised by a number of things. I was surprised by the cost of construction. I was like, wow, that's really high level of cost of construction compared to, Southeast Asia, certainly. So that was one of the things. I was also surprised, the permissions process wasn't as much of a headache actually as it is in other parts of the world. So that was a pleasant surprise. But I think, the main thing that surprised me really, I tell you what's really surprised me actually about the US is, there's the thing like AutoCamp, where you've got the Airstream stuff, which is pretty cool. Okay. And, I get it. You go out, you stay in the Airstream, food's pretty good, you have a cool experience. But, that only has, you can only do that a certain number of times. I don't think you can stay 10 times in the Airstream. So one of the things that I've noticed in the US hasn't seemed to have recognized is that basically what people are looking for is experiential tourism offers. So, it's the RV is. By the way, I love RVs. And I'd love to do an RV adventure through the US. So don't get me wrong about that. But I think also, some of these more kind of far out treehouse kind of lodges and floating lodges on some of your amazing lakes. I think that's been underexplored in the US, and I think you'll see a massive surge in that in the years to come, because the next generation of travelers, those guys, all want to be photographed, jumping into a waterfall from a canyon ridge or something like that, or, in some amazing tent with fantastic views. And it's all about this kind of image-led tourism, which I'm not really personally a fan of. But I think, I think that the hospitality industry is going to have to understand that that's going to be a thing, right? People have bragging rights in that younger generation where it's not the same thing as like, I've got a Ferrari. It's like, I went off-piste skiing in, the Himalayas or something. People have very different expectations in terms of their travel in Gen Z than they do certainly in the baby boomer generation, even in Gen X generation.
So how long does it take for a typical project from start to finish?
Depends a little bit on the size and the scale, but one we did in Mexico was remarkably quick, actually. So we went from starting the concept in April 2021 to opening the resort in December, opening the camp in December. So that was amazingly quick. That was a sort of 8-month turnaround to design and build these kind of quite elaborate tree houses. It was a bit of an unusual one, but typically, let's say it's going to be 12 to 14 months.
Wow. And are you concerned about the accessibility of it? I know we talked about the customer base, but I'm assuming that your nightly rate is up there pretty high. Is it something that's available to the masses?
No, not really. I think And you know, and this is not something I'm very proud of, by the way. But my background was in the super high-end luxury hospitality industry, I had a network in that space. Right? So I might as well be honest about it. So actually, it kind of annoys us all a little bit at the moment. Is you know, we don't just want to do these camps for, you know, hedge fund managers and, you know, the uber wealthy people. Right? So that's become a little bit of the talking point in our company, where we want to really develop some new tent models which are maybe a little bit more accessible and can provide those kind of experiences at a more accessible price point. And you know, that might take different forms. You know, it might be using different materials, might be reducing the size and changing facilities. But you know, I think that though we will always work on that $1,000 a night kind of segment, just because historically we've proven that we're able to do that for big companies like Six Senses and Banyan Tree and these kind of guys. I think that will just be one part of our work in the future. What we'd really like to do is to find some stunning locations and really try and do something that's more in this $200 to $350 a night range. Would be really quite an exciting challenge for us.
So are you discovering things along the way that you think could help with some of society's ills, whether that's affordable housing? I know you've got bamboo experts out there that working on sustainable things. Are you learning some sustainable things that could be put to use for society?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things, you know, and I had a very interesting conversation with an American guy actually in Vietnam last week. And he said a comment. He's a pretty influential guy in the hospitality industry, and he had done some amazing kind of tented camps in Southeast Asia, work with some really, really top end people. He said that he reckoned that he had been able to do more conservation and environmental regeneration work through working in the luxury hospitality industry than he ever would as a volunteer for any kind of environmental organization back in the US. And the reason he said that was because the particular camp that he'd worked at, they'd done a massive forest protection initiative right from the start and had literally protected thousands and thousands of hectares of wilderness in Southeast Asia. And so that's one thing, is that basically, you know, we can be quite critical of the hospitality industry, but what we are seeing is there are people who are really taking conservation very seriously. And one of the things that happened during COVID, for example, was a lot of the sub-Saharan African national parks had real problems with poachers because you know, the hospitality industry was financing a lot of the initiatives to protect the wildlife. So that's one thing, and I suppose that's just you know, I don't know, maybe it's rich people playing philanthropists, but I prefer they did that when they go to Mars anyway. And then the second thing is, you know, we'd be very interested in deployable housing for disaster relief. So we're working with the company in Sri Lanka at the moment to create a kind of bamboo low-cost housing, deployable housing solution. So that's kind of a sort of volunteer project we work on. But also, I think what we will see is two things, actually. I think one, off-grid technology and renewable energies will allow us to develop wilderness camps in increasingly remote locations. So I think, you know, there will be people who want to go and stay in Antarctica and already do. And there'll be people who want to go and stay in really far out places, and that will be technically possible to do that in a low carbon way, just for and that gives the industry an opportunity to test out new technologies for low carbon engineering, renewable energy, wastewater recycling, and stuff like that. And then the third thing I think we've noticed is the consumer demand for sustainable experiences exploding. So to give you an idea on that last one, 44% of respondents in 2022 on Booking.com said they would be planning an off-grid wilderness camp or wilderness experience in 2022, which is kind of amazing. 10 years ago, we would have been 1%, I'm sure, not even. So that's one thing, is that kind of move towards these kind of, far out adventure experiences. And then the second thing is we've seen the guests are basically demanding higher levels of sustainability in the lodging industry across the board. And I think probably the glamping industry and the RV industry kind of get out of, have a little bit of a get out of Dodge card that they can play on that. It's like, we're inherently sustainable because, we're outdoor guys and you can go hiking or whatever, and you've got lots of space and you've got beautiful views. But that might change a little bit, I think. Once people understand, air conditioning a tent in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia is maybe not the most sustainable thing in the world if half the air conditioning is flowing out and sort of heating up the sand, cooling down the sand. Travelers getting more savvy, and I think that will continue. And then the final thing is there's some new initiatives which are kind of incredible, where people are associating hospitality experiences with things like rewilding and regenerative design. And that means, the hospitality industry could potentially become a motive for large-scale reforestation or afforestation projects, which is that's the one that interests me most. Our project Nomadic Escapes, we're planning to plant a tree for every guest night, and the aim of that is to initiate large-scale reforestation through harnessing the bucks from the hospitality industry, I guess.
WCM's Park Update is being brought to you by Woodall's Campground Magazine. For over 5 decades, Woodall's Campground Magazine has aimed to provide park owners and operators with the relevant industry news they need to run their businesses more efficiently. As times have changed, so has Woodall's Campground Magazine. Besides just its print publication, which is distributed to more than 14,000 industry professionals every month, the magazine also reaches readers through its various social media platforms, including Facebook at WoodallCM, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Woodall's Campground Magazine also offers a daily e-blast which highlights the top news from the industry. The best part, everything we do is advertiser supported and free to our readers. As the outdoor hospitality industry continues to grow at a rapid pace, it is important to stay up to date on trends and other relevant news. Subscribe to Woodall's Campground Magazine at woodallscm.com.
So, do you ever see your company evolving into a company that does own the resorts, or that franchises, or comes up with a different sort of a partnership model?
Yeah, exactly. So what we did first is we designed stuff for other people. That was how we started out, and we designed for quite big brands, quite well-known people. Then we set up a tent design company to basically manufacture, ship, install tented products for other people. So people would buy specific tent models. And then in 2021, we set up Nomadic Escapes, which is our management company. And basically, in that company, we will do right from design, construction, operation, and that'll be a kind of turnkey venture. And we're doing the first one here at a famous kite surfing spot in Mauritius. But what we're really looking for is people with, sites in amazing locations who would like to do a management agreement with us, and we would come. They can find finance. We would come and manage the camps. We're looking for places with, fantastic whitewater sports activities. We're looking for fantastic surf locations, incredible mountain biking, even climbing experiences, so that you could create a brand in which all of these adventure sports could be practiced or experienced in different locations across the world. And the US has so many amazing places for this kind of thing that it would be a dream if we could identify an appropriate location in the US.
So any expansion in the US, is the audience for that foreign tourists that would be coming in to experience the US? Is that where the market is, or is it more domestic?
Well, I think it would be both. But you've got such a huge domestic market in the US and so many people. The reason why, this probably requires a bit of explanation. So what happened during COVID was kind of an interesting phenomenon. And I did it myself. I used to go to the gym and have a gym membership and play a bit of squash and do this and that. And when COVID hit, I was like, actually, that's a pretty bad idea. I'm going to catch my death in a spinning class. So I started saying, okay, well, hang on a second. This is probably the only part of my existence where I'm really opening myself up to a pretty high risk. So I went out and I bought myself a pretty decent mountain bike, and I started jogging outside. I started doing some stuff maybe that I'd done previously, and I kind of got out of the habit of. That was actually a worldwide phenomenon. So McKinsey found that there'd been a huge increase in bicycle purchases, jogging, trail running events, obstacle courses, surf sports, paddle sports. All of that stuff went kind of through the roof, and I think that's here to stay. And if you look at our society as a whole, you can see it in the way people dress. You see like cool hipsters in New York wearing, the latest Salomon, hiking shoes in the middle of downtown Brooklyn or whatever. And I think, that has an aspirational quality to it, which will always, which won't be a trend. I think that would be something where there's kind of macro environmental drivers to this. One of them is urbanization. The more people move to cities, the more they will thirst for nature experiences. I think that's almost inevitable. The higher the levels of pollution in cities, I think, will also drive outdoor lodgings a long-term, trend. And then the other one, I think, is the digital thing. Is, I don't know about you guys, but I'm spending 10, 12 hours a day on the computer kind of drives me a little bit nuts. And I really expect that, there will be mental health consequences associated with that in the younger generation. And part of the antidote for that will be, biophilic experiences or opportunities to reconnect with nature and themselves.
So another question that strikes me is that one of the phenomena we had based on the pandemic was this desire to work from anywhere, work from home to start with, but then it became a work from anywhere thing, and it really caught on in the RV side of the industry, where people were buying rigs and just taking off and working their jobs from anywhere they landed. Is that an opportunity for the types of operations you have?
Absolutely. So we've had loads of inquiries from digital nomad camps, digital nomads themselves. Listen, I live in Mauritius, right? I live in one of the most remote islands in the world, and I do projects all over the world, and I have conversations with people all over the world. So I suppose I'm a kind of classic example. I hate that word CEO. I probably should change my name to Chief Nomad myself. But I think that would definitely be a massive movement. It's almost a migration. People will go to lifestyle. I see this in Costa Rica. We've had inquiries, amazing locations in Costa Rica. We get lots of inquiries from places called the blue zones, where people have historically lived a lot longer, and people are kind of flocking to those places. And another one is, I don't know if you have the same word in America. We call them swallows in the UK, which are kind of older seniors who want to get out of Northern Europe for the winters and kind of go down to southern Spain, or like my mother did.
Those are our snowbirds here.
Snowbirds, okay. Well, we call them swallows. Pretty much the same thing. That again, I think that one's going to be a big one. And the other thing I think associated with that would be people with pulmonary issues or concerns looking for places with really clean air and really advantageous environmental conditions for lung complaints, basically.
So these aren't, do you ever see yourself getting into more residential type operations where a snowbird would go down for 3 or 4 months at a time?
Yeah, we're doing that actually. We're doing 14 residences here for our first camp here in Mauritius. And we've got like the cleanest air in the world. That's what we're remote. One of the upsides is we've got like literally the cleanest air in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So we've also had residential projects, got a residential project in Catskills in the US, which was a great project, which is near, not too far from Boston. We've got a residential project also, a kind of eco village, bamboo eco village in Dominican Republic. And we've got another residential project coming up in Playa Viva in Mexico, which will be the kind of ultimate off-grid, wellness community experience. So that's absolutely the way it's going. I didn't actually plan that to happen, but to be perfectly honest, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying designing homes for people, and I think people are going to take my brother for example. I mean, he was paying like $1,600-$1,700 a month rent, not even in central London, like kind of on the outskirts of London, for a tiny like studio flat. And people are going to cotton on to this, is that in other parts of the world you can get a big villa with a swimming pool for like half that price. And I think those of us who can have the opportunity to be able to work remotely, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, okay, everybody loves a pastrami sandwich, and it's nice to be able to go to Broadway once every 3 months. But if you can live on a fantastic surf break in Costa Rica for half the price and still get the same amount of salary working remotely as a freelancer, I think that's going to be a move.
So how many folks do you have working at Nomadic Resorts now? How many employees?
It's still super small. I think we're 14. So and we don't do many projects. We're really kind of selective about the projects we do. So they have to kind of meet certain environmental or sustainability criteria. And we don't, historically, we haven't worked with the kind of massive juggernaut international brands as yet, but that may happen in some way.
So how big could this get? What are your goals for the company?
That's an interesting question. So we're interested in quality as opposed to quantity. So we're happy if we can do 6 or 7 good projects a year. That's enough for us at the time being. But I am a bit more ambitious about the tented camp management company, Nomadic Resorts. I think that could really go big, and we've seen that with collective retreats. We've seen that with Under Canvas. We've seen that with AutoCamp. Those are all US-based companies, but I think in this part of the world, in Asia, and even sub-Saharan Africa, there's a huge potential for this kind of thing because we've got like really long seasons because the weather's good. So I really believe that's going to somebody some point is going to come on and say, okay, there is a real, and we actually, to be honest, we do have a pretty major investor who's taking an interest now. So I think that one will finally go ahead, and that I could see with a little bit more ambition, we might get up to 10 or 12 camps over the next 10 years, I guess.
Okay, and if you could tell something to directly to developers or folks that are thinking about developing something like this in the United States, what would you say? What do you say when you do talk to folks? How do you get them to convince that this is really a good idea and a good market?
I think that the financials speak for themselves, right? You don't get those kind of 65 million private equity investments going into these groups for nothing. Right? The unit economics are good, but you have to be realistic about the unit economics. You're not going to be able to do this with a $10,000 tent in, kind of knocked up in a it has to be professionally done, and you have to have, you have to tick the fundamental boxes that most luxury resort operators consider non-negotiable, right? You have to have a super comfortable bed, you have to have a certain amount of security, you have to have good accessibility, you have to have some good spa and wellness options, you have to have good food and beverage, and it has to be durable, right? I see a lot of people go, oh, well, I'm going to buy, some canvas, Pioneer tents. I've seen these guys, have fitted them out in Canada and they're selling them at $2,500. And those days are a little bit over, to be perfectly honest. I think a couple of people managed to do that in the past, but I think, I can't see that being a long-term thing. So what I think you'll see is it is a super profitable sector. I think we'll see a very large number of RV camps or campgrounds reinvent themselves as glamping resorts. And I think that's a simple thing of levels of comfort expected by a younger generation who are probably not as tough or hardy as some of you old timers are. Sorry, I don't take that the wrong way, Michael.
Oh, I can't be insulted. Don't worry.
Okay, but I think they're a little bit less rugged, let's say, and that they want their creature comforts when they go to the wilderness. You'll always get the hardcore guys, of course, who'll be able to sleep on, the side of El Capitan for 3 nights and stuff like that. Those guys, they're not glampers. Those guys are the hardcore adventure sports.
So you see existing RV parks transitioning over time.
Definitely, and I think that will be both in Europe and in the US. You're seeing it. I know a whole bunch of these companies that are going around staking them out, seeing which ones they can. The ones in really prime locations where you wouldn't get permission, right, for a luxury resort. Those will be the ones. It would be the guys who, even if it's not particularly successful as an RV park, but it's got a great location close to a national park or close to an area of outstanding natural beauty. I think those will go. And where this will all come to a head is, basically these kind of glamping resorts will provide the luxury experience that, a luxury hotel, but they'll be able to build them in places where luxury hotels just will no longer get permissions. And that will be the thing. And people, I'm sure there's scouts scouring the US at the moment. And it's the same in Europe. I think, those guys who've had a French campsite, on the Riviera since the 1960s is all looking a little bit run down, a little bit old. People go cherry pick those and they'll convert them. Because it makes sense, right? You have all of the sewage treatment system, you have the electrics already installed, you have swimming pools and basic infrastructure, you have permissions, and it's low hanging fruit as far as
Do you think part of that transition is that facilities like you work with are going to coexist in the same location? Is it because we're seeing that somewhat in the RVing transition into glamping, whatever you want to call it, glamping in the United States right now. We see large and sometimes not so large traditional RV parks adding some sort of a glamping. It could be relatively rudimentary. It could be quite extensive. Do you see them being able to coexist? Could you have an RV park next to what you've been working on so far?
Absolutely. I think the two are natural bedfellows. I don't mean that in an overly intimate or incestuous way. But I think that, there is a natural affinity between those two things, right? The ideal is to have, both glamping facilities and RV facilities working in parallel, where people are traveling from one glamp site to another in their RV, getting a kind of like a little bit of a different experience in the glamping resort, or meeting up with family at the glamping resort who can't necessarily stay in the RV or don't want to stay in the RV. I think all of that stuff that would be And I think another thing that will come off of that is kind of what I call satellite experiences, where people will set up a glamping, main hub with maybe 40, 50 units, and then they'll identify another location, 6 or 7 hours away, where they'll set up a smaller one and kind of maybe piggyback a little bit on the main facilities, reservations, back of house facilities of the main one, to basically cut the construction costs of a satellite experience. And those things could all be linked together. You could stay at one camp and then, mountain bike to the next one, or horse ride to the next one, or whatever it is, or take an RV to the next one. I think all of those kind of things where your celebration of the actual journey itself, I think that's going to be an important thing, because as we mentioned right at the start of this call, the actual flying experience is pretty unpleasant for most people. I think, I think people, part of travel is the actual experience of the journey or the quest or the movement itself. Exploring. I did a road trip in the US to Zion and to Moab. This is kind of an amazing experience, and I definitely come back and do that with my family. And that in an RV would be a great experience. If I could stay in a farm to fork camp in an organic farm on the way, and we're all in. So it's all that.
So what anybody that's out there stretching the limits like you guys are has to have worries and concerns. What worries you? What's your biggest worry?
I'm going to sound like a prepper, but I think one of my worries is a significant financial crash of some description. That would be one thing. I think climate change is also a massive thing. I know that people don't consider it, maybe. But of course, you must consider it now in the US. You've got snow in Hollywood at the moment. You had minus 50 in Chicago, and half the country's burned. So, I think all of those climatic disasters are going to lead to basically requiring much safer outdoor lodging facilities, particularly for forest fires. I think there'll be a design process for people, certain counties or states are going to implement legislation. All it takes is one accident. Remember that, right? All it takes is, one or two accidents of a forest fire, or, a twister coming through a camp somewhere. And, in our current society, that would change the legislation, and, which would actually play out in our favor, I think. But I think that would be another risk of concern.
Okay. Well, anything else that you'd like to cover, Lewis? I don't want to. Obviously, Ben's not coming back, so we managed to get through everything, I think, pretty well here. You've certainly answered all my questions, and it's just fascinating to take a look at what's going on worldwide in a very niche sector that a lot of people aren't playing in. So it's just fascinating to see that you've got this reach all over the world, and you've done it staying close to your principles. You haven't gone off and created a dirty site. You've got these beautiful locations that are being done the right way. I think you're a great role model for folks in the US that really want to get into this.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. I think that the only one I'd say is, keep your eyes out on some new locations. Central America, a lot of inquiries out of the Caribbean and Central American countries. I think those can be some amazing locations, in Mexico and all the way. We've had inquiries from Brazil, through Colombia, through all sorts. So I keep your eyes open for those kind of experiences over the next few years. And, let's hope that this COVID experience basically has changed people's perception of tourism, and that we continue to have a clientele seeking more authentic and nature-based experiences. And if that is the case, then I think all the people in this sector are gonna probably have a healthy livelihood for the foreseeable future.
Well, this is so great to hear, and I really appreciate you joining us today, Lewis. And again, nomadicresorts.com if you want more information, and or to get a hold of these folks and start investigating how to get something like this going in the United States in a bigger way. So again, thanks for your time today, Lewis, and we really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much to you, Michael and Ben, if you're there. But thanks, it was great to talk to you guys. It's really interesting to me.
Thanks, Lewis.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to WCM's Park Update, a production of Woodall's Campground Magazine. Join us for a new show each Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn for daily news and updates, and subscribe to our news feed on our website at woodallscm.com. Show hosts are Ben Quiggle and Mike Gast. Executive producers Rick Kessler and Alex Burkett. Copyright 2022, G&G Media Group.